Welcome back to Tabletop, everyone. It is your host, Nick, and today I have perhaps the greatest friend of the pod, and I don't say that lightly. Mac, welcome back to Tabletop. How have you been?
I've been great, Nick. Thanks so much for having me back, and that's very sweet of you to say.
I think that you, at this point, are the only person who could hold that title, as you're the only guest who's come on enough times to warrant it. But we are here because last year you did me the huge favor of telling me all about what happened at PAX Unplugged. This year I again was not able to go, but you were. So we're doing another PAX Unplugged unplugging debrief episode, whatever that is. So what were you actually going to PAX Unplugged like in your mind? Did you have a specific game or a specific type of game you were looking for this year? Was there was there rumors spreading about any specific thing before you went in?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, I think, for board games specifically, where nothing is really like launching at PAX Unplugged. And that I noted. And PAX Unplugged is a really great place actually to explore kind of like more indie new stuff. So I was really excited to check out some of the new things that, maybe developers I hadn't heard of because we're in such a golden age of board games, and because, publishers, even small publishers, are able to get the news out about their game so easily. And places like Shut Up and Sit Down and No Pun Included and all this stuff will review even games by smaller publishers. We're able to learn about them a lot faster. And a lot of the really excellent games that are coming out, or the games that are getting a lot of hype right now, are from established publishers that also aren't giant mainstream monsters. For example, Leader Games, the new Cole Whirly game that just came out is called Arcs, which Shut Up and Sit Down did a great video about. I would recommend listeners to check that out. But like that was something I was excited for, and that was there expectedly. And then I was just excited to also get to play some games in the board game library that I hadn't had a chance to really play before. Another thing that was really big, I think that was there, which was really exciting, less exciting for me because I kickstarted it, but was the Slay the Spire, the board game, was there like heavily. They had the deluxe edition, they had the normal edition, they had the giant playmat, which, I think that was the box I saw people with the most over the weekend, was the Slay the Spire, the board game, which is excellent, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, the hype is huge because Slay the Spire 2 has also been announced, and some trailers and stuff has come out. So it kind of feels like they're like, yes, Slay the Spire time.
Yeah. So I would say there wasn't any one thing in particular, which is, kind of odd. Because, a couple of years ago, I think that there was all the new hotness, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just so plugged in. I know all about it now. I don't know.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about was like, because we talk about this quite a bit and we sort of complain quite a bit that like, some of the bigger publishers like Fantasy Flight and all, Asmodee and all that kind of stuff, they don't really, like you said, they don't launch a whole lot. And when you go to PAX Unplugged, it's sort of disappointing to go to their booths. It's sort of just like, hey, you can buy our stuff like you can in any local game store. Yeah. But hearing you talk about this, it kind of feels like there is sort of that mid-tier sort of, it's not like the art house movie, but it's like the $1 million movie. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it feels like the board game industry is starting to develop that sort of mid-tier development studio. Is that like your feeling when you were walking around? Because like you were saying, there's like certain developers that are sort of making names for themselves and are able to make these kind of new games hyped up based on their previous ones that they've released.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for example, so Asmodee actually was there this year, but as far as I could tell, they were offering two things.
Yeah.
One was the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game, because trading card games sell, and their trading card game area was actually sick, and I'll talk about that later. Not Asmodee's in particular, but like the whole thing. Yeah. And then they were there for that. They were also there with the Arkham Horror role-playing game, which I'll talk about more later too. But yeah, I would say that the medium tier developers are out in force. So like Earthborn Studios, they have that one game, Earthborn Rangers. They were there. They had like expansion content that you couldn't get anywhere else. They were selling the game, which is really quite difficult to find.
Yeah.
The print run of the game, specifically for PAX Unplugged, was done by a local publishing house.
Cool.
So when I bought the game there, and when I bought the game, the person at the booth was so sweet. They were like, "Hey, just so you know, in this copy of the game, because it was printed locally, one or two of the cards is a little crinkled." And I'm like, "Okay, is this a card that I have to like shuffle into a deck?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, I don't care about that. This is a game that is designed to be able to be, like buried in the ground when you're done with it.
Yeah.
No plastic components, so whatever. But they were all very sweet. And it's also like people really talk to you. Like, so one of my actually best experiences at PAX Unplugged was with one of these mid-tier developers called, have you ever heard of Off the Page Games?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, cool. You heard of like Mind Management and all them?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, their first game I think was Mind Management, which they kickstarted, and that's based off a comic book. And then after they did that, other comic book writers started approaching them and being like, "Hey, you should make one for our game."
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of on the con floor, my friend Ethan kind of noted this game called Core of Discovery, which we thought looked pretty cool. And we sat down and we did like a little demo. Coming to find out, the guy that we were demoing it with, Sen, is one of the co-developers of Mind Management. And he's like
cool.
one of the owner, like one of the main, he's not the owner of the company. Jay is the owner. But he is like the main designer, one of the main designers for this company. And they had a booth like all the way in the back. They were selling only 3 games. They were selling Mind Management, they were selling Core of Discovery, and they were selling something hollow. I don't know what the title is, but I'll look it up. But they were selling just these 3 games, and just Sen, this guy that was showing us this game, was so cool, and just showed us Harrow County, that's what the game is called. Just showing us the game and talking about game design and talking about his process and how that company actually works, and like the things he has to do outside of his work as a board game designer to like make it all happen. So I think that this was really a place for like contention games, the developers of Slay the Spire, all those people to really flourish. Because even, back in the day, Cephalofair, who created Gloomhaven, Frosthaven, Buttons and Bugs, all of those things, they were, they had one game created by one guy, So I think that PAX Unplugged is a really good place for those developers to show off their stuff.
So yeah, I think that we should like run through, there's different genres that we both really like, and I just want to hear about all of them. So why don't we start with just like expansions and stuff like that? Like for me, the obvious, we both really love the folks who have made Ahoy and Root and all of those games. Were they there, and did they have anything new that was exciting?
Yep. So as I mentioned, Leader Games did have Arcs. They had Arcs, which was the new thing, which it's hard to find the base game right now. Yep. You can, for some reason, find the expansion like a lot, but the base game is kind of tough to find. So my fiance was doing a Secret Santa at her work for someone she did not know very well, and the only thing she knew about them was that they like board games, and I bought them Arcs. So that was like the game to buy. And then they also had the new Root expansion there. Like I mentioned, they had a new Earthborn Rangers expansion there as well that I have not been able to find online since. And I did not get because I didn't know if I'd like the game, and I like it, so I regret not buying it. But other than that, there was some expansion content here and there, but not too much that I saw on the floor. But maybe I just wasn't aware enough of the games that were around.
No, I mean, honestly, I think that if you weren't attracted to any specific booths, then it probably means that people could take a pass on it, in my opinion. But so I also want to hear a little bit about not TTRPGs, collectible card games. So both you and I have been getting more into these. I guess I wouldn't call Arkham Horror a collectible card game. It's like
It's a
the
living
PAX.
card game.
Yeah. But there's Lorcana, there's Magic, there's all of the Pokemon. And in past years, like they were launching Lorcana, and that was like a huge presence on the floor. You talked about the Star Wars card game, but was there anything like, did that feel like it was the theme of the con, or did it feel not so much?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they had a massive TCG area. So the games that were represented, oddly enough, now that you mention it, Pokemon was nowhere to be seen.
Really? Because when I went, they had that huge booth right in the
Nope.
center of the hall.
Gone. They did
Wow.
not have it. Yeah, I don't know what was up with that. There were people like selling singles, and there were people selling packs, and there were probably drafts and stuff that were happening, or sealed events. But I didn't encounter any of them. They didn't. So the big banner games were Lorcana, which is like my game. So I played in a couple of Lorcana tournaments, which were all run incredibly well.
Was it run by like third party, or was it officially?
It was run by Pastimes
Gotcha.
Games. Yeah. And I think they were all run by third parties. And then there was Star Wars Unlimited, which, you know, the big Fantasy Flight presence there. Magic, which is obviously just massive. It's, you know, it's probably the biggest moneymaker in all of paper gaming, like for real. And then Altered was there as well, which is the new FT trading card game, not NFT, because they're fungible tokens, but they're still basically NFTs.
Dope.
Which it's a fun game. We tried it. It's fun to play. I'm not sure if I want to get involved in something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I, for some reason, I feel like maybe it's just my YouTube algorithm, but I feel like the sort of gambling nature of collectible card games has really been on the rise the last few years. And so like I see a lot of mainstream interest, but more so of like, oh, if I pull this card and get it graded, I can make $600 or whatever it is. So
yeah, which is what I like about Lorcana, right? Is that like there's like one card in the entire game.
Yeah,
that is like the big chase card that's worth more than like $300, and then the next most expensive one is like $250. So, and even that, and these are all just like alt arts. Like it's not a big deal. Whereas in Altered, the whole point of the game is that you can get unique versions of cards that belong to just you, and then you can sell the rights to that card to somebody else, and then they can print and play that card.
Interesting.
That's so like. Basically, when you submit your deck for a tournament, as far as I understand it, your deck list will come with a QR code. And then the tournament organizer will scan that QR code. And then they'll be able to see, like, yes, all of the cards on this list belong to this person's account. And if they don't belong to your account, you can't use them.
Wow. Okay. And so is there like an online sort of database or whatever that you log all your cards in when you...
Yes, there is. Like every card has a QR code on it. Like here, I can show you because, you know, we don't have a film aspect to this, so no one's going to steal my QR code. But like I got a promo like of like one of the heroes in the game, and you can see there's like a QR code in the corner.
Oh, gotcha.
Of the promo. Yeah. And so when you scan that QR code, it becomes a part of your collection, and then nobody else can use it. So again, it's like it's a cool idea in practice. But then it just becomes, you know, kind of pay to win. You can include, I think, 3 of these unique cards in your deck. Decks are pretty small, but there's no mulligan. So it's like you might not ever see it, but you might see it. But if you do see it, in some cases, you just kind of win.
Yeah.
And then it's like if you have one of those cards that is so good that you just win with it. I don't know. Someone in your comment section might be like, I play Altered and this is not the case, which I would actually love to be true. But it does worry me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it feels like, you know, just like talking it through, it's like the same feeling I get when you start stumbling into like an MLM or something where you're just like, ooh, this feels weird.
Yeah. Which, I mean, trading card games in general do feel that way.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I mean, there has to be a secondary market for a trading card game to thrive. There just has to be. And that way it saves the people that don't want to gamble. Like they can have an exact price tag of like, okay, if I want to play this deck, if I want to buy these cards for this deck, this is what's going to set me back. And then, you know, hopefully the pricing structure of tournaments and things like that can help pay back your investment.
Right. I mean, and we've talked about this before off mic, but I love the idea of a QR code somewhere in the pack that just automatically takes whatever's in the pack and puts them into a collection database online so that you can just theory craft or even have like an online sort of platform that you could play on. That sounds great. I wish all card games did that.
Yes, it would make it so much easier because for Lorcana, like we just have like a fan-made database.
Yeah.
Where we have to like manually input.
Yeah, God,
oh my
it's
God.
so bad.
It's brutal.
Yeah. But so I wonder how that's going to go. I think that like, yeah, well, keep your eye on it. Tell me if it ends up like what the story is here, because I could see two ends. One being that, oh, it gets like super popular and this is the way card games kind of move forward, or it's going to be, just disappear like most card games. So we'll see.
We'll see. They also haven't yet released. They released the game before they released the marketplace on which you can trade these things.
Interesting.
Or like buy the rights from each other. So nobody knows right now what these things are actually worth.
Yeah.
Except I think there might be some stuff on like eBay where it's like people are like already
trying to sell them.
Trying to sell them. Yeah.
I think it's also like the big thing that I would be concerned about, especially if there's money attached to it, is that if this is just like a card games database, like that's going to be cracked into so fast if there's money there. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
I feel like, as soon as there's like a $500 card or something, then like a hacker or whatever will just pop in, break it, and then grab the QR code or the rights to that card and sell it 1,000 times, and it becomes worthless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it looks like there's one that has a buy it now of like $400 on eBay.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people just kind of prospecting, trying to sell them before an actual price comes down.
A lot of $300 ones too. Yeah.
What about any? Let's go to like legacy games. You and I are playing in a pandemic legacy game right now. So fun. Legacy games in general are awesome. You have like a long-term Arkham horror game going on, like the card game that's kind of a legacy game, and that they just keep supporting it with new stuff, and you can kind of continue on stories and things. What kind of vibe were you getting? Is that fad sort of fading, or is that still a big part of the con?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the community is moving away from legacy games with like permanent alterations and moving more towards living games with modules. Like, for example, Earthborn Rangers has a campaign like Arkham. It's in one box, but you never destroy or remove anything permanently. You can reset the game back to its base setting very easily, actually. And a lot of games actually were like this. Like Slay the Spire, the board game is like this because of its roguelike nature. But you do unlock like the Ascensions, which makes the game harder. And actually, as you play, you unlock more cards for your the characters, just to kind of like make the learning curve easier. Mind Management is a great example of this, right? Where like Mind Management is a 1v all hidden movement game, and whenever one of the sides loses, the losing side gets like a new little box, which usually has like a cool card in it that just makes the game different. It doesn't make the game easier for them; it just makes the game different. And then there's also this game Core of Discovery, which is by the same company. And the version I got just has like a bunch of little like missions and modules in it. So I actually didn't see a lot of legacy games. Arcs also has a big campaign expansion. But again, it's all resettable. It's not meant for destruction. So the main legacy games on the market right now, obviously, are Pandemic Legacy. And then you have your Frosthavens, and Gloomhaven 2 is coming out soon. But other than that, I think that legacy games are going away and are falling out of favor a bit, and mission-based games or games that have like advancement, right, have a campaign vibe that you can then reset, are more coming into focus.
I mean, I guess that makes sense to me, just because like every time we rip a card in Pandemic, it makes me kind of queasy because I'm like, ugh.
Stickers on the board too are hard.
And it sort of does feel like, oh, I can only play this once. However, I mean, that's like 12 sessions is once, you know what I mean? So that's probably more than you play most board games. But I could see people just like psychologically being resistant to it. And maybe this is a better way to hook people into a long-term playing of a game. But who
Yep.
knows?
Oh, and Clank Legacy 2 was there. I didn't check it out. I played like halfway through Clank Legacy 1. I said, this game is good. It's fine. And then I kind of stopped playing it.
Yeah, Clank, I feel like, is one of those like Splendor or Catan or something where it's just like, this was amazing when it came out and it was like the first one, and now everyone does it a lot better.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go into like let's just do general board games. We've kind of talked like a lot of different subcategories. What were your like, these look awesome, and then these ones you were like, I heard a lot of bad things, or if there was any. I know you're a pretty positive person and just kind of going for the stuff that you're interested in, but was there, the winners of the con and the losers of the con when it comes to board games?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, like you said, like I kind of didn't want to waste my time on anything that I thought might be a loser. So I didn't really spend a lot of time doing that. But what I can tell you are the games that I played and that I thought were kind of cool. I think that a lot of people say this Spire the board game. A lot of people with arcs. I thought that I'm trying to think now about like really winners and losers. The vibes were pretty positive in general. Yeah. And like I said, like there really wasn't anything. There was like last year, like Sky Team was like the thing.
Yeah,
right?
We talked about it. It was just like everyone, when you were walking around, everyone had a Sky Team under their arm. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That kind of thing.
And that this year, that game was Compile, which was like a 1v1. It's kind of like Air, Land, and Sea, but instead it's computer stuff. And our mutual friend Anthony got it on day one and was like, okay, if I like it, I'll like buy the playmat, I'll get like everything. And then by day two, the game was sold out and the playmat was sold out and everything was sold out. But they didn't have enough copies of it for it to actually like be prolific. Yeah. And because it's not as accessible as Sky Team, you didn't see people around the con playing it all the time. I just know that it was popular because it was gone.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was more that like this was just a small studio and underestimated how much demand there would be, or was it a scarcity tactic where they're like, we're going to make this thing have a huge reputation by only printing 100 of these or whatever?
The former, and they got a big boost by Shut Up and Sit Down labeling them like one of the 10 best games of 2024. So, and that was like right before the convention came out that they released that. So I would say that Compile was probably the big one. If you ever have a chance to pick it up, if you see it anywhere, get it, because it will not be there for long. It's selling out incredibly quickly. And then I guess for losers, the only one that I'll say, and I don't want to be salty, I don't want to be rude, but this game Firetower.
Oh, we played it.
Man. I know. Is at PAX Unplugged every year.
Yeah. I feel like they're just like, why hasn't this caught on yet? Because I see it on Amazon all the time as like a sponsored game. If you go into like the board game section and you want to buy a board game, it's always there as a sponsored game. It was there 2 years ago when I was there. We played and we were like, oh, this game is mediocre.
Yeah. It's not for us.
Yeah.
And it's like very kind of like take that, and then like once you're eliminated, you're out. And the theming doesn't, in my opinion, really line up with the thing. It's just kind of like and it's there every year, and it's in the same place, and I'm just like, I don't know. I want to see more new stuff.
Yeah, totally. So going off the same sort of question, what did you come home with? What are the things that you were excited enough to buy and come home with?
Oh, let me tell you all about it. Okay, so let's see. I bought a lot of Lorcana stuff.
Sure.
Which was cool. But that, that's less important. I did end up buying that game Core of Discovery. So Core of Discovery, I'll talk about it in more detail now, is basically how Sen described, the designer described it to us when we were doing the demo, was it's like cooperative Minesweeper and Sudoku. Yeah. Mixed with a survival game. And Nick, you've played this game at this point. Mm-hmm. Oh no, you didn't.
Oh no, I missed that day. No,
you were sick that day that we played it.
I want to play it really bad. We have a game day coming up where I want to try a bunch of board games, so I hope we can play that one.
Yeah. So it's basically it's Sudoku and Minesweeper and Survival. So it's based on the comic Manifest Destiny, which is like a commentary upon the Lewis and Clark journey. But it's like, what if it's Lewis and Clark were looking for monsters? And then big spoilers for Manifest Destiny. Big spoilers. Jump ahead like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear these. And then they go back in time and they kill Christopher Columbus. So
I love that. Without any context, that's amazing.
Yeah. If you've skipped ahead to this point, you're past the spoilers. But so anyway, it's a comic called Manifest Destiny that is sending up and kind of commenting upon the whole Lewis and Clark journey. And so basically the game is like you're exploring around this grid and you're looking for like certain supplies to not like starve to death while also trying to fight monsters and like giant plants and minotaurs and stuff.
Yeah, and now that you've kind of sat down with it, are you happy with your purchase? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Oh, a huge thumbs up.
He's just a great developer. He's a great designer. So
it's very, very cool.
What else did you come home with?
I came home with Earthborn Rangers, which I got to tell you, Earthborn Rangers was more complicated than I thought. Nick, how would you say I am at teaching a board game?
I think that you're very good at teaching a board game.
I think so too. Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
In fact, I would say that we have a joke between us where you're like, how about you teach a board game, Nick, you fuck? So yeah, I think you're probably the best out of our friend group.
Well, thanks, buddy. I think I'm pretty good at it. We sat down on the con floor and I was like, you know what? I've heard this game is really similar to Arkham Horror the card game.
Yeah.
I have played a lot of Arkham Horror the card game. And also the people I'm playing this with are board game people. We can sit down and we can learn this game easy peasy.
Yeah.
We sat down on the con floor, just at like a free play table. I open up the game and we go through the prologue. And it was maybe the worst teach I've ever done or experienced. It was really bad.
What made it so bad? Because we've played some complicated games. Like you have been the person who has run both Gloomhaven and Frosthaven games. Those are fairly complicated. There are other games in your chest where it's like, if anybody else had shown me this game, I would never play it.
Right. What it was the rule book was very clear.
Yeah.
It was like, before you start this prologue, have someone read the rule book.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm sure we'll figure that out. And they weren't kidding. Like, there are just some things in there that are very complicated. And the prologue has you. So the game is it's like a living card game, but it's in one box. So it has these different classes of characters, and you kind of mix together two classes to make a deck, and then you add in some like skill cards, and that's your whole deck. But if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know like how you're supposed to be making the deck, the prologue has you like slowly make it and just add the cards really slowly. But if you don't know what you're actually aiming to do, it's really hard to make any decisions at all.
Yeah, that's really interesting as a design choice, just because like using Arkham Horror as a template, that game comes with a suggested kind of like preset deck that you can start any of your investigators with, so that you can learn the game with like a deck that's not going to totally fuck you over.
Yes. It still does. And especially with the original core set, you were just screwed. Yeah. But yes, I think it would have been nice if the game had just come with some decks and been like, play this prologue with these decks. Okay, now that you know what the cards do, this is how you make a deck. Go do it.
Yeah.
So that was a bad first impression for the game, but the game is really fun. It's like cozy Arkham Horror the card game with it's very kind of easy, but it's not like supposed to be hard.
Right.
And it's not like you're like trying to win even. You're just trying to like explore and define stuff, which is really
kind of
cool.
like a logic puzzle where it's like just playing the game is the part that's just like the gratifying part where you're like, ooh, I did this thing.
Yeah. And what's really cool, and I mean, any review that you've seen of this game is going to tell you about this, but it's like the really cool thing about the game that you can take for granted is like a lot of games will be like, in Arkham Horror, for example, a monster comes out and it'll be like monster, nightgast, like fly or something. It'll have like some kind of traits to it.
Yeah.
We don't really interact with those traits very often. There's a few cards here and there that interact with those traits, and maybe some cards in like the encounter deck. But in Earthborn Rangers, every card in the game interacts with a trait on another card.
Ooh, wow.
So like
that must have been just a terrible design time.
Oh yeah. And it's like this card interacts with this card. So Anthony did a cool thing where he had a card where you could basically shoot something with a dart that turned it into a plant. So no matter what it was, it got turned into a plant.
Right.
And then somebody else basically had a sickle that they could use to forage plants.
Yeah.
So this giant monster thing, we turned it into a plant, and then someone else foraged it, and it would have been really hard to like kill it. But if we because we just turned it into like a flower, it became really easy to deal with.
That's amazing.
And so you can be really creative. So that's Earthborn. I took home Earthborn, Core Discovery, and then I also got Mind Management because I didn't have it, so I got that. And I think that's about it as far as board games that I bought. I'm trying to think if there were any others, but I think that's it.
That's the core set. Cool. So I have two last categories for you. One is I just kind of want to skip over just because we both have kind of a passing interest. And the last one, you've seen this from two different sides, so we'll talk about that in a second. But the category I just want to spend a little bit of time on is miniature games. So usually, like Warhammer's there. X-Wing usually has a presence as like a fan-run tournament or whatever because nobody supports that game anymore. Yeah. But was there any sort of like miniature games that were being pushed or like updates to any existing games that you were like, oh, that looks cool? Or was it sort of like that this was not the year?
Yeah, there were miniature games all over the place. I didn't have a super huge interest in them. So like X-Wing had a small tournament, Kill Team had a tournament. There was a lot of paint and take kind of stuff happening. Not on the main floor this time. They really expanded out the convention more, which was awesome. Great. There was so much more space. So stuff like that. But yeah, no, not too much. There's like this cool game that I see every year that I never try because it looks like it's kind of for kids. Yeah. Which is like you build like literally out of like Legos almost like a ship.
Oh, cool.
And then you fly the ships around. So that's kind of cool. They had some cool like some other aerial combat games that looked kind of neat. Yeah. But no, nothing in particular.
Awesome. All right, coming to the part that probably most of the listeners of this podcast will be the most interested in. You were there both as a consumer, but also as somebody who is in the process of designing and finalizing a game of your own, a TTRPG specifically, though yours is sort of like a TTRPG that has like a set of, how do you say, like peripheral, not peripheral. What is it when something is made for a specific purpose?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It has like bespoke cards.
Yeah, but like that's it. Yeah. Bespoke parts to it. So it's sort of like in the land between a TTRPG and like a board game or something like that. Yeah. So what was the vibes there? I heard from you kind of off mic that there was a lot of kind of development places and that there was a lot of indie developers there and you were there. So what's the vibe? What's coming? What did you see that seemed to be exciting? Mm-hmm. What's in store for TTRPGs?
Yeah. So for TTRPGs, there was a huge D&D place where there was so much D&D free play. Yeah. Which was awesome to see. And there were a lot of other role-playing games around that I hadn't played or experienced yet. Like they had the Legends of the Five Rings role-playing game.
Is that a 5e expansion sort of thing? Like it uses the D&D system, or is it a completely original game? I kind of... Because I know that there's a ton of Lord of the Rings stuff, so...
It's not Lord of the Rings.
Oh, gotcha. Never mind then. I'm thinking of the 5e sort of expansion setting that they had. That was the Lord of the Rings.
So Legend of the Five Rings is an FFG role-playing game, and they also had a living card game about this as well.
Oh, cool.
And it's not based off of D&D. It uses its own system.
Nice.
And then the main RPG that I actually got to play that I had not experienced before was the Arkham Horror RPG because I'm a big Arkham Horror fan, and that was really cool. Yeah. I thought it was really sick. So how it works is, You have 6 stats, and each stat has is represented by a number that you have to hit on a d6, and you have a pool of 6 d6. So, for example, if I have an agility score of 3, I need to hit a 3 on a d6 to succeed. And I have 6 d6. So when I'm at the beginning of a combat scene, let's say, and someone tries to like shoot me, and I'm going to try and avoid that, I can use as many d6 from my pool as I want, as long as I choose beforehand. Let's say I rolled 2 of them, right? And I succeed, right? So then those 2 are gone for the round. I now only have 4. So then it hits my turn. Okay, I have 4 d6 to use. So every 10 feet of movement, I spend a d6. When I attack, I roll the d6, and I'm trying to hit, like, maybe my agility is a 3+, but my strength or whatever the score is, I can't remember, is a 6+. I need to get a 6 on one of those d6 to succeed. So the higher the number is, the worse your stat is.
I love dice pool games. They're like my favorite, just because like I love the idea that I can commit all of my dice for this one action and then be completely useless afterwards.
Yes. And they re-up at the beginning of every round, which is nice. And something that's really cool that this system, it uses the dynamic pool system, which was not created for this RPG. It was created for a different RPG. I think it's by Edge Studios, but don't quote me.
No one's listening. It's just us.
Yeah, so they in narrative scenes, you still have the 6d6 dice pool, but you don't get them back until the narrative scene is over, which is really nice, because when I did my play test of it, when I kind of sat down to demo it, and I did like a 3-hour session, one of the people I was playing with, like, it's to be expected at a con, they wanted to get their hands dirty. They wanted to be in the mix. They wanted to play the game. And what that meant was that some other people at the table who were a bit more reserved didn't really get to play it. But in this system, what was cool was after that person was out of dice in a narrative scene, they couldn't do anything. So they kept being like, can I do this? Can I do this? And the GM was like, you're out of dice. Like, let's let other people do it. Because the dice represent, like, your character has done this many things.
I really like that. Wow, that's really cool, because that is like a problem across all TTRPGs, that the people who are more comfortable are just going to play more. You know what I mean?
Right. And so also, like, you know, I'm a GM. I have a tendency to also be one of these kinds of players. But and you can aid people by basically, like, you roll one of your dice, and when they roll their dice, and, you know, if you succeed, they succeed. And so what I was doing a lot was just being like, hey, like, you know, like in role play, right? Like, hey, like, I'm not really good at this. I don't know what's going on with this. Can you check that out for me? And then when they would do it, right, they would get to take an action that their character would do. Like, they got to, like, actually do something. And then I would just roll one of my dice to show, like, hey, I helped point that out to you. But I'm not the one doing it. I'm not the one getting the information. So that later I can, to your character, be, hey, what did you learn? You tell me. So I could kind of like NPC my own character around, which was actually really fun. Like, I actually liked it. It made me feel like I had a lot of agency, and like I could empower the other players at the table without like having to big dog them.
It does feel like kind of, which is, I think, both of our styles in board games, not so much TTRPGs, but both of our styles in board games is like, okay, let's think as a round rather than as an individual. Like, for example, an easy example of this is Pandemic. When we play Pandemic with like our group, all of us are like, okay, so if I do this on my turn, then you can do this on your turn, and then they can do this on their turn, and that completes an objective. So it kind of feels like it brings a little bit of that into the TTRPG space, where you can be like, okay, as a team, we can spend resources to do this kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly, right. Between the 4 of us, right, we have, you know, 24 D6 that we can use to kind of like figure things out. And some of us are better at stuff than others. So yeah, very, very cool system. My GM didn't know the rules. Which was hard.
Was it in development or is it released?
It's released. I actually, I asked my family to get it for me for Christmas. So hopefully I'll be getting it. But the, yeah, my GM just like, I think her attempt to simplify to make the 3-hour session feel satisfying was misguided. I think that like she simplified some things that didn't need to be simplified, and all it did was like make us feel like the game was broken.
Yeah.
So, but
that's
so
a heads up to GMs everywhere. If you're doing something that for like, especially at a con or whatever, learn the fucking game.
Yeah.
Because you're basically responsible for everyone's first experience with that game when you sit down with them. You know what I mean? And like you said earlier with Earthbound Rangers, like if you have a really bad first impression, it can like slow down that second time you pick it up. So yeah, huge responsibility.
Well, and the only reason why I ended up picking the game up was because they had a rule book that I could like just peruse afterwards. And I was like, hey, like, because I played it with our friend Ethan, who is helping me to design, who is also designing this role-playing game alongside me. And we were like, let's look at the book, because some of that felt wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in the world. Like, I love the world, so let's see. And we, like, pretty much immediately, it took us maybe 2 minutes to be like, oh. Like, the GM was doing this thing where in every combat, you're supposed to get your dice back at the start of each round.
Yeah.
But she just was like, once they're spent, like, in a narrative scene to try and make us, like, go faster.
Yeah.
And to have combats last less time. And that's just not a thing. Like, you get them back. Like, you don't spend them. And that completely ruined... Like there was one person at the table, like, honestly, this person who clearly was very comfortable with games, who really wanted to get their hands dirty, that was like, wait, but then how does the game work? And the GM was like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, you know, like, didn't really have a great answer, so...
Yeah. Okay, so that was a standout one for you. Was there any other TTRPGs by like other developers or indie stuff that you were seeing, or people who are in development that you were like, ooh, like I gotta keep an eye on this kind of thing?
I'm trying to think. There, I mean, of course, there was tons of Morkborg stuff. Yeah. That's still really in the zeitgeist. But no, nothing especially new. Honestly, there wasn't anything that I discovered that seemed like brand new from an indie developer. A lot of the stuff in the Unpub room, you know, was like kind of light, more like family games. Which, you know, when you really think about board games and you think about how many there are out there, I would wager a good sum of money that the majority of board games that exist are family and party games.
Yeah.
And we just don't tend to focus on those things because they're not our jam. But like if you go to Target, you know, like there's a wall of designer games, and then there's like two more double the amount of sections of these small box games, right? So you can fit more on a shelf. And so I did actually go to a feedback frenzy at Unpub, which basically was like people pitching their games to game developers.
Yeah.
And all of those games were like pretty light family games. All of them. Yeah. No role-playing games. Mm-hmm. No more heavy economic or trick-taking anything games. Yeah. All very simple, like a deck of cards is the whole game. Right. Kind of games. So that was kind of interesting to me, right? It's kind of this kind of, you know, I think that the world in general is a bit of a pendulum.
Yeah.
And
I think we're in a stage of like retraction away from...
I think so. I think that we, you know, like as board game folks, you know, like board games used to be so complicated that they were really, you know, like you think of like Dune, like the original Dune, you know, Twilight Imperium, even like Risk, honestly, like their games are so complicated, and kind of like 18xx games were so complicated that they were so not accessible. And then we got to this place where, okay, now they're like really accessible, almost too baby. Mm-hmm. And that was like when we were younger. And then now it's swung back to like, okay, things are complicated, but not too complicated. And I think it's going to swing back again now to like, people want simplicity. They want things that they can hook their friends with. Yeah. So that now they can play the games in their collection.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how many times have you, I mean, not with our group but you rhetorically have like a game that you want to introduce your friends, and they're like, I just don't want to learn a new game. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with TTRPGs when you're like, oh, you want to try out this new system? Majority of people are like, can we just use D&D? I'm comfortable with D&D.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, that makes sense, especially in like a weird economic time, to just like kind of go for simplicity so that people can play one game a bunch of times with a bunch of people kind of thing.
Right. And these people also, because they were pitching them, right? They were basically practicing their pitches. They're thinking about actually like, how many cards exactly are in this game?
Yeah.
How big does the box need to be for this game to work?
Right.
What's the cost of producing one unit of this?
Yeah.
Which is really helpful, really interesting, and really cool to think about. And something that Sen, the developer, the designer of Core Discovery and Mind Management, was saying was like, you also really have to think about with your game, is this a book or is this a box?
Yeah.
So for TTRPG developers and designers, like, be thinking about, is your game just a manual? Is it the D&D player's handbook?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it the D&D starter kit?
Yeah.
Or is it both of those things? Because most companies only do one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like if you think of something like D&D Onslaught, where it's sort of like, that's a box. It doesn't really come with a book, but it's like skinned as D&D, but it's really kind of its own separate thing, kind of, you know. But going off of that you were talking about, you are in the middle of developing a game. In fact, we're going to have an episode with you and Ethan, your design partner, in January. I've been playtesting with you. You were going there to kind of feel out the con in that regard as well. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, as from a designer standpoint, what value came from the con and what you were looking at and what you were trying to do?
Yeah, it's like, if you start looking for it, for like game design and game development, you will find it. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And people want to talk to you about it very badly. Like, I would start pretty much every conversation that I had with anyone that was behind a booth that I knew was a developer. I'd always ask them, like, how did you get started with this?
Yeah.
What was developing your first game like? And then, of course, eventually they'd catch on and they'd, about like what they'd be like, oh, are you interested in game design? And I would talk to them a bit about like where I'm at with the process and how, the things that I don't even know about, all of that stuff. So it was super cool just to talk to people, and anyone that's developing a game at these places, at conventions like this. You're gonna feel kind of annoying, right? Because like, you want to talk about your thing.
Yeah.
But talk about your thing. There was also a really cool new game that my friend Anthony's friends were developing. Oh goodness, what was it called? I have like a promo card for it over here somewhere. I found it. It's called Here Be Monsters.
Okay.
It's a pirate card game.
Cool.
And it's like, it comes with like a starter set, and then you buy like different decks basically for the game. It's not like a pack game. But they just set up, they didn't get into Unpub, which is like the unpublished game playtesting room. It's really competitive to get in there. You have to get in right when it opens. They just set up a table at Free Play and just like set up hey, we're playtesting our game. Come over here and like check it out. They had like people coming by like every once in a while, and like I talked to them about my game. They talked to me about their game. They talked to me about the process of designing art. They all this because they're planning on developing it themselves.
Right.
So they're gonna have to make all the art. So I would recommend people check out that game too, because it seemed really cool.
That's awesome. Any last thoughts? I mean, we've kind of gone through the board games, the card games. We talked briefly about sort of the party game sort of vibe when it came to all of the pitches and TTRPGs. Anything else that you're like, oh, I didn't talk about this yet, or anything that you think is worth saying about this year's Unplugged?
Yeah, I guess the main game from the game library that was a big standout that I really haven't heard much about and kind of got middling reviews.
Okay.
Was this game called Galactic Renaissance. So your listeners might know the game Innis, INIS. So this is the second game from that developer. And I guess he's making a trilogy of like political games, with Innis being the first one and this being the second one. And our mutual friend Anthony is really into Innis, has really been wanting to play Galactic Renaissance. And we were just kind of like, bopping around the library, seeing if there was anything we wanted to play, and he found it. And we pulled it out, we learned it on the spot, and we played it, and that game slaps.
Really?
That game is so good. Yeah. It's really fun.
Why do you think it was getting middling reviews?
I don't know, honestly. Yeah. It's pretty snappy. Mm-hmm. It has a lot of the same DNA as Innis. It has a really cool system where each player starts with a deck of like 7 cards, and each card is basically an action.
Yeah.
And, so you just like play the cards that you're dealt to start. And then as you go, like, because it's in space, there are like more planets that come out, and each planet has an ability. And you can, once you become allied to that planet, you get that planet's ability. So it's an engine building game, I think, that really kind of like hits a tipping point pretty early on, where you go from being like, I'm playing 1 card a turn and getting like 1 or 2 points every 3 turns to I just got 18 points in a turn, I win. Yeah. And it's really cool to like build that engine, and to in the way that there is interaction in the game is very interesting. It's not very like I roll dice, you roll dice, we fight. It's very much like, if anyone has played Innis, like, hey, like, I have started a conflict here. I'm going to choose what to do first, then you choose what to do, and we go back and forth until it is resolved.
Interesting. So it's not like a Feast for Odin or something where you are just like one at a time picking actions and they become unavailable. You can kind of mix it up with your fellow players.
Yeah. So what's super cool about the game is like you have these ambassadors that go to planets, and each planet has a certain amount of slots in it. So let's say that a planet has 6 slots, okay?
Yeah.
And I have 5 ambassadors there, and another player has 1. The second that another ambassador is placed on that planet is about to enter disorder, basically meaning there's going to be a fight, but it's not even a fight, right? So basically what happens is the person that started the disorder chooses. They can move one of their ambassadors. They can remove one of their ambassadors from the game. They can move 2 of their ambassadors to another planet, or they can play one of the cards from their hand that has like a reaction ability.
Yeah.
So really it's about like, okay, I'm going to start disorder on this planet because I have a card that I can play once the disorder begins that lets me remove more of their guys, and then they're going to have to do the disorder thing. So, and then you do that until everyone has gone that is on the planet. And then if there are still too many guys, you do it again. Gotcha. But if all the guys are gone, or if there are not enough guys, you stop. So it's really clear to know. You can kind of plan out exactly what you're going to do when one of these things happens, unless your opponent has one of these cards that you didn't expect, and that's where the spice of the game comes in. It's like, oh no, like I thought I was going to be able to like be here and have the most guys here, which would give me a scoring condition, and it's a good game. Check it out, Galactic Renaissance. I don't think it's getting enough love.
Cool. Well, Mac, as always, thank you so much. We're going to have you on next month with Ethan to talk about the playtesting process for Mnemosyne. But anything else you want to plug before we shut down for now?
No, not really. Thanks so much for having me on, and I'm excited to talk about some playtesting next time.
Hell yeah. All right. For everybody else, you can get in contact with the Tabletop folks at tabletopod.com. You can go to our Patreon if you want to become part of the Patreon family by going to patreon.com/tabletop. We have some extra bonus goodies in there as well. All right, everyone, have a great end of your year. Goodbye.
Bye.